Hi, Robert. I hope it's okay to contact you again. If you want to post this on your page, could you do so without my name? Because it's a bit of a vulnerable share. After our conversation recently, I realized how much I've held on to numerous beliefs about the meaning of life and the spiritual journey. You said, I think, that The 10,000 Things is a dangerous book. You might not have said it that way. Now I get that. I am left with nothing to grasp onto, a sort of sense of free-falling. Or another way of putting it is I'm left with no escape. I find myself in a place of both grief and some liberation, although in this moment more grief than liberation. I scroll down Facebook and find post upon post about the so-called spiritual path, the soul's purpose, using astrology to make sense of where we are at in this time of evolution, etc. And I find myself seeing through all that as just more ways of escaping the fact of not knowing who we are and what is the meaning of this life. So this leaves me with nothing to grasp onto. My whole adult life has been oriented towards a spiritual path. I mentioned I felt scared, a feeling of not being in control. It feels so primal. I am finally meeting the place I have always run from in my search for meaning. When I allow myself to just be here, I find some peace and deep acceptance of the groundlessness and uncertainty of being human, and even a sweet tenderness. One of the ways the thoughts show themselves is trying to hunt for a future direction. I feel almost frantic when I can't find a way out or a way forward. I am not even sure what I want to ask you. Perhaps I just want to hold your hand as I fall, if only to remind me that fear is okay, not knowing is okay, and everything passes. Sending you much love and gratitude. Answer. I find myself in a place of both grief and some liberation, you wrote. Yes, freedom and a kind of sadness go together, like love and tears. This is the kind of sadness that is called in Japanese mono no aware, a sensitivity toward the ephemeral. At first this may feel like grief, but with understanding, grief is replaced by acceptance and an appreciation of the gift of being at all. It is the feel-good stories aimed at explaining away tears and sadness from which one must be liberated, not the feelings. I did say that the 10,000 things could be dangerous if one is not ready to feel the emptiness that must arise when those feel-good stories are seen as the childish nonsense they are. Clearly, my perspective is not for everyone. But still, 4T, which is about what Jiddu Krishnamurti called freedom from the known, had to be written. I do not know your background, but let us suppose that you were raised to believe that Jesus loves you and awaits you in heaven, so that your present life here on earth is only a kind of rehearsal, only a brief period of suffering and difficulty, after which you will live forever in a place of joy and endless happiness, accompanied by all the people you love now, and even, some people believe, all your old pets. The only requirements are that you believe this story by taking it on faith, and that you follow certain rules, mostly about sex and other ordinary behaviors. That may sound silly, but remember that countless human beings believe that story and find they say deep meaning in following the rules and in banishing from their minds any doubt or even the faintest suspicion that the Jesus story might be a human fabrication, that it has nothing to do with what awaits us after old age, illness, and death. I know personally many people like that. I would never talk to them this way unless asked. I cannot prove that the Jesus story is a human fabrication. After all, there might be a heaven, and the Son of God might be waiting there to reward you for a life of belief and rule-following. But you would need to be completely hypnotized and deluded to imagine that there is no doubt about that story. There might be a fairy at the foot of the garden, too, or a unicorn in the next meadow. That's just an example. The same applies to those who imagine that they are on a spiritual path that leads to liberation. Liberation is only a name for an idea, like heaven. All we ever know is this moment, not some imaginary future time in which one is free entirely of pain, grief, and sorrow. Such a state of complete isolation from ordinary human suffering may be as imaginary and unreal as eternity in heaven with Jesus, or it might be psychological dissociation, an indicator of mental illness. So here I recommend that you put the idea of liberation out of your mind entirely, and in each moment be as you are. Just see what you see, feel what you feel, and think whatever you think. That is the best liberation, I know. Forget the high-flown ideas and just be yourself. If you live for the future, you will never find the ground of your own being, which is always only now. And if there is any liberation, it must, I say, be founded on that ground, not upon some fantasy put in your mind by others about a so-called spiritual path. The grief you feel is the price one pays for snapping out of the hypnotic trance, the belief in some ultimate meaning that is not here now, but which will come to us eventually. Sooner or later, we must grieve everything, for everything will be lost. Our youth, our friends, our loved ones, our physical powers, and eventually this aliveness itself. You say that perhaps you wrote to me as a way of just holding my hand as you fall. We are all falling. Ring around the Rosie, a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. We are all in the same boat, it appears to me. Perhaps seeing that is a kind of liberation. In my view, we are all human beings who have no way of knowing the ultimate truth about anything, or even if there is any such thing as ultimate truth. And so, as we are all in this together, we might as well be holding hands. You are doing just fine, it seems. Just hang in there. Clarity is always right here for the seeing. Let it be. I wish you well. Thanks for not holding my hand, Robert. I have fallen into my own seeing and authority. Aha! Brilliant.